Kuphina kuphi emakhaya amadolobheni aseComplasta khona sasingenile ke bekunene ke, and welcome to this week's edition of Yilungelo Lakho. Ihlelo ke lokulethela ke tindzaba texwayiso nako konke lokuthinta ke nina njengabathengi. Mina ke ngingisimphiwe Ngcongwana. Now, buying a residential property is an emotional experience as well as a financial decision, but a lot can go wrong, turning that home buying experience into a nightmare. Namhla ke bekunene sibuke ke tinfo lekumele ukuthi kubukisise kahle uma uthenga umuti. Asasingena endzabeni yethu namhla. Now, if you're buying your dream house, it's very unlikely that you'll have an appetite for crawling through the ceiling, climbing onto the roof, and check all the electrical wiring or even scrutinize the foundation before signing that purchase agreement. Most home buyers, especially the first-time buyers, get so caught up in the excitement and the paperwork that they do not think a thorough house inspection is necessary, and forgetting that their new home could be hiding underlying problems. Namhla ke ehlelweni ke sina Masilo Picheng kanye ke na John Graham bahlole ke betindle lababochwephesha asimukele ke Masilo Picheng ulo nathi ke lapha endli teksakata bese kuthi ke enkundleni ekuxhumana ke iZoom semukele John Graham. Gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invitation.
Mr. Picheng, I'm going to start with you. Kuthi kahle kahle yini i-home inspection nekuthi ke kumcoka ngani ukuthi bantu anzube ukuthi bathenge imithi noma ke tidle noma ke property bayende le house inspection kuthi yini and kumcoka ngani? Why is it important?
To answer your question, I think we need to start way back, a little bit back, because from uqala ngo 1st February 2022, it was the first time ukuqala nje ngo ukuthi home inspection is compulsory la eMzansi.
Okay.
Previously, mawuthenga indlu, bowuthembele ku agent yakho or umuntu okuthengiselayo or uthenga kuye ukuthi akutshele ukuthi makunenkinga ngalendlu le wethengayo. But from the 1st of February 2022, it's now compulsory for mawuthenga indlu ukuthi umthengisi and no agent yakho ikutshele ukuthi if kunenkinga ngalendlu le wethengayo. So that it's called a declaration, and it's now written into law.
Okay.
Uguti, that process has to be declared up front if there's any problems with. And so that means that from now on, from the 1st of Feb, as I said, it's very compulsory that those things that might be a problem in the house, up front. Because as you were saying in your introduction, buying a house, most people focus on what they like. They like the kitchen, it's beautiful, it's big enough, they like the bedroom, they like all of these nice things that, because buying a home is also, there's an emotional investment.
There's an emotional investment.
And that emotional investment makes you forget other things. That's number. Number two is there's a practical thing about buying a house. Normally, when you buy a house, the day you're going to visit, there's people that lives there. So kune furniture, kuna carpet, kunani. Awuna skati, and secondly, awukwazi ukuthi ususa furniture ubheke ngasemva ukuthi amabonda anjani nani. So there's that practical element.
Ivale ini le
carpet ivale ini. Angeke ufike ungene uthi hayi susani carpet ngifuna ukubona.
Yeah.
So those practical elements, the new law tries to deal with both. Because what would have happened in the past is that before the law was compulsory, it's if I find something after I bought a house, I mean, it takes about 2 to 3 months to get a transfer. So a house that I saw in January, I'll probably move in March or April.
Yes.
What I saw in January and what I get in April might be two different things.
Yes.
So it's to close that gap. Ukuthi lesikhala lesibasivale. Ukuthi lento lengiyibonile January. Mangiza April, at least into zakhona sintshanga kangakho. Begune stove le day ngifike lana, the day I move in sisasekhona, and it's still the same one. Okay. That is why kumqoka ukuthi ufanele uyenze shosho ukuthi ufuna abantu abazokubhekela.
So according to the law, who needs to foot the bill your home inspection? Kumele bhadale lo
muntu othengisayo, the seller.
Or the seller?
The seller has to declare. But you as a buyer, it's also in your best interest to make sure you can nothing stops you from requesting to do an additional inspection. But the obligation is now on the seller. He must declare the condition of the house.
Okay. So naile inspector like is his own preferred inspector? Or is it a government inspector?
Primarily it's the prerogative of the seller.
Okay.
But the law doesn't make it compulsory. It makes it compulsory that you must do an inspection.
Yes.
But it doesn't make it compulsory that you must use an inspector. So you can do your own You as a seller, there's
You
a
do your
form
own
in the law.
inspection.
You can do your.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's the sort of weaknesses that are in the legislation that says you need to do an inspection. But it doesn't say you have to hire an inspector.
Ngoba sengiyacabanga ukuthi what if the seller is not capacitated, to carry out the inspection? What if lo muntu othengisako kule ndlu akade ukuthi kumele abuke ini noma ka-inspector ini?
Generally kunjalo. Uthola ukuthi both agent because normally mawenza i-transaction ye property kune agent angithi le kurepresentayo and then yourself. So between the two both of you might not have the skill to do it.
Yeah.
That is why in the law there's a section that says if both of you do not have a skill, then you have to hire a professional.
Okay.
But we know in practice, you may find that as an agent, because there's a form provided for in the law. If you complete that form, one of the weaknesses with the form, there's a section that says where you can say, I don't know. Hence, because it's not compulsory, I can just fill in, I don't know. You can't hold me liable for something I don't know. Those are some of the things I think as we get to learn about this, I'm still fresh, those gaps will start to become apparent. This is overlega, I think, as professional comes in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Graham, let me also bring you into this conversation. As I've mentioned, first-time buyers in particular get caught up in the excitement and the emotion of buying a home for the very first time, and they overlook very pertinent issues that, they might get caught up with in later years. So when buying a home and roping in the services of an inspector, what is it that they inspect? Because we've heard Masilo earlier on saying that, we don't know what the cupboards are hiding, we don't know what the carpet is hiding. So what is it that an inspector inspects in a home?
Thank you, Simpiwe. Yeah. Just building on what Mashilo said, the Property Practitioners Act, Section 67, says that an owner of a property must declare what they know, because it's obvious that they can't declare what they don't know. And the new property law, which I think is an excellent law, doesn't make it compulsory to get a home inspection, but I think it's going to become commonplace, as it is in the United States and many places in the world, because really it's a no-brainer. If you fall in love with a home, you need to not only buy with your heart, but you need to buy with your head as well. And if you don't mind, Simpiwe, I'd just like to focus a little bit on what the owner is likely not to know. What I have termed at House Check a latent defect. So, for instance, the compulsory form that Mashilo referred to asks the owner to declare, am I aware of any leaks in the roof? Now, if the roof is not leaking, he's not aware of any leaks, unless he's dishonest and is hiding the fact that he's putting a bucket on the dining room table at night. But the roof might be in terrible condition, and it might just be waiting for one big windstorm or rainstorm for it to start leaking because it hasn't been maintained and the roof covering is in shocking condition. So that would be called a latent defect. Now, unless you climb on the roof, the homeowner won't know about that, and that's where a professional inspector would come about. The same would be with a hot water geyser installation. Hot water geysers are normally in South African homes installed inside the roof cavity. That's a hot place, it's a dirty place, and typically no one goes there until the geyser fails. So the plumber goes up and the electrician goes up, installs the geyser, and then it gets dusty and hot and dirty for many years, and nothing happens until the geyser fails and hot water comes through the bedroom ceiling, perhaps on your little one where they're sleeping next to the bathroom. Who knows? But again, a home inspector climbing into that space will see if the geyser has been compliantly installed. That means, does it have a drip tray? Are the overflows connected? Is there any loose wiring? Is the geyser casing in good condition? The same with the roof structures. Many houses in South Africa are very old. They've been built in the 1940s, the 1950s, and the 1960s. And some of those old roof timbers are beginning to age and are often not compliant with the national building regulations, the modern national building regulations. That's not a problem as long as they're sound, but someone has to go and have a look. Are they bending and buckling? Have they broken perhaps? Is the roof sagging? Is there a problem waiting to happen? So the law is good because it requires the owner to declare what they know, and it requires the estate agent to give that mandatory form, that compulsory form, to every prospective buyer and tenant. But estate agents, I think, are going to come to rely on home inspectors to fill the gap between what the owner knows and what the reality is. It's what I call a trigger
Mr. Graham,
event.
you say that the law is good in this particular instance, but isn't it a loophole that just about any home seller, even though they're not capacitated to conduct a home inspection, because they may give a sunshine inspection, as it were, as you said, they might be dishonest and declare some of the, all the good things only and leave out the bad things in the particular property?
Well, it could be a loophole, Simpiwe, but nowhere in the world, to my knowledge, are home inspections compulsory. But in most parts of the Western world, certainly home inspections are a no-brainer. For instance, in America, 8 out of 10 properties are inspected every time they're sold, because estate agents don't want to be sued. They want to protect their reputations, because buyers are aware that no house is perfect, and there are serious defects and there are less serious defects. And it's a job of a trained inspector to say, this crack is a problem and may be structural. We need an engineer to evaluate it. This is a cosmetic crack. It just needs a bit of polyfiller and paint and it's as good as new. But only a trained inspector will be able to raise that red flag. So the onus is always on the consumer. I think the estate agent is a gatekeeper of the real estate process. He's the intermediary between the buyer and the seller. The estate agent, he or she, has an incredibly important role to play. And the new law says that the agent, even though the agent is being paid his commission or her commission by the seller, the agent has legally speaking now, has a duty of care, an equal duty of care to the buyer and to the seller. And so an estate agent should be saying to the seller, you either get an inspection to give me and my clients peace of mind, or I'm going to point out to the buyer that this owner has chosen not to get an inspection, but there are various areas where there might be latent defects that the buyer honestly or dishonestly doesn't know about.
Okay.
And so it's all a matter of
let's leave it there,
buying
Mr. Graham. Please hold your thought. We'll continue our conversation after the break. Eh?
Okay.
All right, thank you. Mbukeli, asesibambe lapho sesishiyele ngasethu. Please join us after this commercial break. Leli, Yilungelo Lakho. Sakungela futhi ke mbukele tincingo tefe sethivuliwe ukuthi ke nawe ungavakalisa umbono wakho ke shayela licingo ke ku-011-714-6918 noma ke 011-714-6919 ungasithumela futhi ne-email ku-consumer@sabc.co.za noma ke uhlangile kanye nasi ke ku-Facebook. We'll be taking some of the Facebook messages in just a moment. Namhla ke mbukele nangabe ucetha ukuvula nje umsakazo wakho sikhuluma ke nge-home inspection noma ke kucilonga ke umuntu wakho ungakawuthengi noma kungakawuthengisi noma kucilonga umuntu lofuna ukuthenga ukuthi ke why is a home inspection so important? That's what we're discussing namhla ngisinabochwepheshe ke be home inspector ama home inspectors, but asichazela abantu ukuthi yini lokumcoka nge-home inspection nekuthi ke ku-inspector yini loku-inspector ngoba phela utawuthola ukuthi uthenga umuntu namhla ngakusasa kuvele nje kuhovokele kwesilingi umangala uthwala imkhono enhloko ukuthi ingabe ke sekwendekeni kepha ke ngoba uthola ukuthi awukayendi lento lemcoka lenjenga i-home inspection because you got caught up in the excitement and the emotion of buying a house without taking care of some of the most pertinent things like inspecting the home. Nekuthi ke konke kuyasebenta yini emagiza asebenta kude ke la kuvuta khona ilphahla noma kithi kude la livuta khona. Namhla ke sina Masilo Picheng and as well as John Graham. They are house or home inspectors, but awusita kuhlangena sekudzingitsa lendzaba. So I want to talk about the timing, or when should a home inspection be done? Is it done maybe during the viewing process, or maybe after I've signed that OTP or offer to purchase, or nase my transfer?
Ideally, Graham uqonde kahle ngokuthi every single person lo afika azobuka lendlu leyo afuna ukuyithenga, the agent must make that available because it's part of me deciding whether I want to buy or not. Okay. Ukuthi I must reach that decision. I'm basing it on that piece of information. So ideally, it needs to be available up front. And I think the law now provides for that every person who's interested, who's coming, you need to declare to them whatever the condition is. But the practice, and I think agents over time, they'll only give it to somebody who has an offer on the table. But over time, they will get to get to that practice. All of us will get to that practice. The only thing I think is Funuguti, that we must maybe go back to is lento le uGraham bekakhuluma ngayo ukuthi mina njengomthengi I rely mostly on what I see with my eyes, cosmetic stuff, aesthetics, the beauty of the house.
Yes.
Whereas the inspector look at other things that generally you won't see with your naked eyes, no matter even if you try. Structural condition of the house, things that any reasonable human being will not pick up. Even the owner, even if they wanted to be as honest as they want, they might not even know. For you, a crack is a crack. But for me, as an inspector, a crack can mean 100 many things. Depending on the type of the crack that's on the wall, depending the shape of the crack, can mean a lot of things. You understand? So it is not only about honesty, declare. It's about the fact that you want to do it as best as possible. The other benefit, Uguti, because now this thing is available, ungakwazi kuyisebenzisa for insurance yakho. Next time, because one of the things people ignore when they buy, because your insurance when you buy a home comes with a bond in many cases. And most people don't even read that insurance. They take it for granted or they're covered. Until they claim and the insurance comes back and says, no, there's workmanship, we can't pay you.
And I'm actually surprised that insurance companies are not demanding a home inspection before insuring that home.
Because it was not required. So they have this thing, what they call general cover. They'll say, if I look at this house, it's covered for a value of X. So it's included in your bond. And they'll say, there's an insurance value that we are accommodated for.
Okay.
And that's how they covered the thing. But that didn't take away the obligation where, I mean, we had an experience, if you allow me for a second, where somebody bought a property, bought a house.
Yeah.
And within 2 years of buying that house, all of the tiles, a brand new house, all of the tiles of their bathrooms, they had 3 bathrooms, came off the wall. Right?
Whoa.
So imagine you're a new owner and they come off. So what do? The first thing they do is to rush to your insurance. And the insurance arrives and the bank says, no, we can't pay for this. It's workmanship. Whoever did this work was poor workmanship, so we don't pay for workmanship. They go to NHBRC, which is the other cover that you get when you build a house. NHBRC says it is not a structural damage, so we can't cover it. So all of a sudden, within a year of buying that house, you are close to 80,000 out of pocket. You know. So the inspection report, umqoka makuza lapho ukuthi ayikusizi nje ukuthi uthenge. Izokusiza nokuthi uwazi ukuthi if uyakwazi ukuyinikeza insurance company, that's an advice we'll give people, ukuthi uyinikeze insurance company yakho ukuthi later if something happens you are able to say lento le manje ithenga beyinje.
Okay.
Yeah, and then you don't have into those troubles where you are now out of pocket because there's a lot of people who some of our clients who told ukuthi they've bought a house, they've bought it within a year, 2 years, they go and claim for the roof, as uGraham bekasho, and insurance it angikwazi ukubhadala because this roof was never constructed properly. And then you are out of pocket. So lezo zinto zimqoka because it's not only mawuthenga, it's down the line because you're going to live in that house for quite a long time.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Mr. Graham, I'm sure you've been listening to Mr. Mashilo. He made a very pertinent point there with regards to just looking at a home and looking at the aesthetics of the home without getting deeper into the structural effects or impact of that particular home. I mean, it leads to my next question. Why is it important to conduct a thorough home inspection, especially if the home is new or bought off plan? Nobody has occupied that home. I mean, he made an example of tiles falling off the wall. And are inspectors, or can inspectors predict that tiles will actually fall off the wall because it looks so spanky and new?
Well, you can, yes, simply where if you tap on the tiles and they sound hollow, then they probably haven't been properly bonded with the adhesive. But I'd like to make another couple of points regarding what Mashilo has said about the insurance companies, homeowners insurance, which is compulsory if you have a bond. But you know, most of your viewers will have life insurance, and you know that the Old Mutual or Sanlam or whoever will not give you a life policy unless they are sure that you are in reasonable health. And quite often, particularly if you get older, they'll ask you to go to the doctor and have a medical before they give you a life insurance policy. And that makes sense because they're risking a lot of money on your health. They're gambling that you're going to live, and you want the insurance in case you don't live. But the same with a homeowner's insurance, it doesn't really work that way. Short-term insurance, particularly property insurance, works where the underwriting, that's the evaluation of the risk, takes place at claim stage, not when the policy is issued. In other words, if you get a bond, the bank who gives you the bond will say you need to insure the house in case it burns down or a truck runs into it or something like that. And they'll say that you need to insure it for 2 million rand, which is a replacement value. And this is a premium. It's 800 rand a month, and it's going to be added onto your bond. And Mishilo is quite correct. That's fine until the roof starts leaking or there's a problem, the tiles fall off the roof or whatever, and they send an insurance assessor around, and he says, no, there's non-compliance. The roof is the incorrect pitch. The tiles weren't laid properly. Whatever it might be, the boundary wall is too tall and wasn't approved by engineers and national building regulations say, we're not paying. It's called repudiation. And that makes policy owners very, very angry. And insurance companies, I think, are going to move to a stage that instead of underwriting at claim stage, they get an inspector in when they issue the policy so that they know what their risk is and that they know what the homeowner should do in order to maintain that policy and be assured that if he makes a claim, the policy will be paid. But can I make another point regarding the South African real estate industry? I've been in property inspection, home inspection for many years, and our experience is it's mostly buyers of expensive homes that use home inspectors. And so it's not uncommon for someone paying 4 million, 10 million, 20 million, 100 million to say, I want it inspected and I don't care if it costs 5,000, 10,000 rand for the inspection fee because it's a big mansion in Constantia or Bryanston or whatever, but I want to know what's wrong with that home. But the vulnerable people are the first-time buyers, and first-time buyers in South Africa are increasingly women. And those people are very vulnerable because they're mostly buying properties. They're starting out in their property journey. They're buying, say, from between 700,000 and maybe 2.5 million. And my experience is that very few of those people ask for a home inspection or are offered a home inspection. And they are the people who can't afford to take the financial knock if there's something wrong with the home they've bought. And it should be a professional snag inspection. Mm-hmm. Can I give you your view as a very useful example? Yeah. If you're sick, in the medical world, if you begin to get a sore throat or something, you go to your doctor and he looks down your throat and he says, it doesn't look too serious, you've got a slight temperature, take 2 aspirin and go to bed. Or alternatively, he might look down your throat and say, I don't like what I'm seeing, you better go and see a throat specialist, maybe there's a big problem in your throat. And a home inspector needs to be like that general practitioner. The home inspector needs to know about every aspect of South African building regulations, building standards, building laws, brick buildings, frame buildings, different types of roofs, air conditioning, underfloor heating, plumbing, electricity, everything. He needs to know enough to be like a general practitioner, to look, and as Mishilo said, that crack is not serious, but this crack is very serious. You need to get a specialist to evaluate it. So the home inspector is a critical part, and I think the buyer needs to make sure that either he or she pays for the inspector or the seller pays for it. Sometimes even the agent is willing to pay.
Okay, let's leave it there for now. We'll continue our discussion in just a moment. Mbukeli asasiphinzela ngasetolo futhi sihlanganyela kanye nasemva kwalokho. Yilungelo Lakho ke bekunene. Welcome back. Our participation lines are now open. Shele kulicingo ke lapha e-studio kuze kuthi ube ingcenye yenkulumo yethu. Those studio lines are 011-714-6918 noma ke 011-714-6119. They're on your screen right now. You can also email your views to consumer@sabc.co.za noma ke usithole ku Facebook. Let's take our first caller sena David lapha eRustenburg. Sakumolo lihlelo sawubona.
Good afternoon, Simpiwe.
Good afternoon, sir. What's on your mind?
I've got 2 questions here. Is the owner entitled to get the copy of the inspection report? And then question 2 is, if the owner still feels that the condition of the house are not satisfactory, what is it that he should do?
Okay, David, great chatting to you. Thank you so much for that call. Please answer David's question.
So I suppose from David's question, my assumption would be, because he didn't indicate, that the owner is actually the seller. The law requires the seller to be the one who declares the condition.
Okay.
So by that very nature, the owner should be the one who have access to the report, right? If the buyer requested the report, chances are that buyer would make that available to the seller, because if there are any defects that are being identified, you would want those defects to be fixed before the transaction could take place, or at least some level of guarantee that at the time the transaction is concluded, those will be fixed.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. John, what are your thoughts on this, on David's questions?
Yeah, we actually have a motto in our inspection company, House Check. We say building bridges of trust, that the real estate transaction process should be transparent. And you only trust people when information is declared to you. So at the moment, it's mostly buyers who pay for the inspection report, because sellers are often cash strapped. That's why they're selling their properties. And so the buyer will pay for it, but we always encourage a buyer to make available a copy of that report to the estate agent, so that the estate agent can act as an honest broker, a middleman between the buyer and the seller, and give both of them honest advice. You remember the Property Practitioners Act says an equal duty of care. So the estate agent should be able to look at that inspection report and say, well, listen, Mr. Buyer, you're getting this property very cheaply, and therefore there's maybe 30,000 rands worth of repairs, but maybe you should just suck it up and pay for it yourself. Or the estate agent could say to the owner, listen, you're getting a good price for this because the owner has made an offer subject to a satisfactory home inspection, but you need to fix X, Y, and Z. So it's all a matter of negotiation. Now, I just want to make something clear. Home inspection by law is not compulsory, and the seller is not required to get a home inspection. All the seller is required to do in terms of the new law is disclose what they know. Okay. It's up to the estate agent to then give that mandatory disclosure to every prospective buyer, not just the one who signs the offer to purchase. But the estate agent should be saying to the seller and the buyer, a professional inspector needs to look deeper, because otherwise it could backfire on all of us. If there's a problem, one of those latent defects I spoke about that only manifests after the property has been transferred, it's going to have a massive impact on the estate agent's business. The buyer will want to sue the estate agent, will want to sue the seller, and it makes a lot of sense to build a bridge of trust and say someone needs to pay just a few thousand rand to inspect a property that you're spending millions on. You wouldn't buy a second-hand car without a mechanic having a look at it. So it's crazy in South Africa that we make our biggest investment and we don't get anyone to look at it. So it's not compulsory, but it's certainly sensible. And buyers listening to this program, you should insist that either the seller gets an independent inspection, we call it an IPCA, an independent property condition assessment. We think it should be a little bit like FICA in the financial world. Every property should be IPCA'd. Someone who's independent and knowledgeable should look at it and say, this is what we see.
But as you say that a home inspection is not compulsory by law, but can an inspector demand to see the certificates of compliance and verify such certificate presented by the seller or even the estate agent?
Well, an inspector is not competent to verify, for instance, electrical certificate of compliance, because you have to be a licensed electrician to issue an electrical certificate of compliance. Remember my example of the GP in the medical world? The electrician is a specialist, the inspector is a GP. The GP cannot question the specialist. So it would be up to the agent and the buyer to say, I want to look at that COC. And there is an electrical verification authority if you suspect that the electrical COC or the gas COC or the plumbing certificate of compliance, that's what COC stands for, may be suspect, you can get it verified. But that's a specialist legal requirement. A home inspection is a general assessment of the overall condition of the property, every aspect of the property from a structural, functional, and safety point of view. That's very different to a COC.
All right, thanks for making that point. Let's take our next caller. We've got Juliet in Pretoria. Sawubona.
Ngiyabona njani?
Siyaphila kunjani mama?
Yeah, please.
Khuluma nathi, ma.
In case where inspection was not done properly and the transaction already went through, what do you do? What the next step should you take?
Good question, Juliet. We'll have our guests and analysts, answer that question in just a moment. But for now, let's take another ad break. Sitawuhlanganyela futhi naso sibuye emakethe. Welcome back. Thank you so much for tuning in. Yilungelo, Lakho. Please pick up your phone and call us on 011-714-6918 nomage 011-714-6919. Dingingo tethu dala phake studio. If you've got any question or a query or you want to share any story related to our subject. Namhlanje sikhuluma ke ngebumcoka be home inspection. Kuthi ke before uthenge ekhaya noma ke indlu kumcoka ukuthi ke wente naku lebathi ke home inspection. Namhlanje sidzinga yona ke lendzaba le ukuthi yini home inspection, yini kumele ukuthi bakubuke ema inspectors. Now, when do you conduct a home inspection? And these are some of the pertinent issues that you need to consider before buying a home. Now, Mashilo, before that break, we had Juliet. We have Juliet. Nangabe inspection it goes wrong and the transaction has already gone through. What then happens?
It's a bit of a tricky question. Tricky not because there's no answer, and we'll get to the answer. It also goes to ubani onigese who issued the instruction to the or inspector.
Yes.
And what was the instruction that was given to the inspector? Because in a building inspection, I can issue an inspection where I say, just for the roof, go and do an inspection of the roof. I can do an inspection of moisture, whatever. You understand? So depending who issued that instruction and the expectation on the other side. So let's deal with the fact who issued the instruction. If I'm the one as the seller issued the instruction, and the instruction to the inspector was go and inspect the roof, inspect this and this, because those are what we call itemized inspections, right? As opposed to a comprehensive inspection that Graham was talking about. And you as a buyer, you have an expectation that they should have inspected a swimming pool, and it's not part of the report. You can't hold that on an inspector as a bad job, because that was not any part of his instruction. But if you, the person, inspector, and the inspector gives you a bad report. Now, that's unprofessional, and you would have to have a recourse against that particular inspector. Most inspectors and most inspection companies would have some liability insurance that they should keep, so that if there's a claim against them, they would be able to settle. But as I said, it's a trick question, because if you are not the one who issued the instruction to the inspector, you have to go back to say what was contained in that instruction. For a typical example it's also geographically important. Problems that you find in Centurion and problems that you find in the Western Cape are different. So, for example, a building, if I'm from the Western Cape and I'm buying in Johannesburg or I'm buying in whatever, in the Western Cape, there's something called an entomology report. It has to deal with wood boring bucks. That's a requirement in the Western Cape, but it's not a requirement up here. But if I live in Centurion, I know Centurion's got a problem of termites, for example. So if I'm an inspector in Centurion and I don't know that I must look out for that, it shows lack of experience. So the question, if we know about who would have been the instructing party, because if I've instructed you and you did a bad job, professionally you should, I think, all professionals, you should, particularly an experienced and a properly registered inspector, you should be able to claim against that. Also in the legislation, there's an allowance that you are able to complain against that particular professional or that particular agent that would have been involved in that particular transaction. You can lay a complaint against them.
I want us to look out for what to look out for when you select a home inspector. And we've got Pumlan in Orange Farm. Please stay on the line. I just need to pick John's brain on this. John, before we enter the break, we had Juliet who's asking, if an inspection has gone wrong way after she has occupied the home and a transaction has already gone through, what normally happens? Because I suppose everybody would want to know some sort of recourse if there is such.
Absolutely. Thank you, Simpiwe. Yeah, building on that, one of the most important things is that an inspector shouldn't only have public liability cover, that's if he falls through the ceiling or something like that, but he should also have professional indemnity cover, and that's if he makes a mistake or misses something. It's called errors and omissions. And most insurance companies won't give you professional indemnity cover unless they recognize the training that you have. And therein lies a problem in South Africa. Because in South Africa, there's no recognized, government-recognized training for building inspectors, either municipal building inspectors, NHBRC building inspectors, or private sector and home inspectors. There's a lot of training programs, and we worked with the banks and with the NHBRC and the municipalities over several years to develop a national building inspector qualification, which would cover home inspectors too. But for whatever reason, it's still not been certified. So CETA certification counts for something, and many of the banks recognize it because it follows the South African curriculum of building regulations, building standards. In other words, it's not American training, it's South African training for South African buildings. There's a National Association of Building Inspectors of South Africa, NABISA. You'll find that at nabisa.org.za, which has a code of conduct, which means that inspectors have to make sure that they abide with a code of ethics when they inspect. And as I say, you should have the training, you should have the insurance, and you should have the knowledge. And fourthly, you should have the tools. Okay. You should have a moisture meter. You should have the ability to assess levels and do necessary measurements, whatever your, if you are inspecting a roof.
We've got another caller. Please hold the thought. I beg your pardon. Yes. Let's take our next caller. Sinaphumlani lapha Orange Farm. Sakumukele ehlelweni sawubona.
Yebo.
Khuluma nathi baba. What's on your mind?
All right. Okay, ngibingelele ohlelweni ngibingelele SABC yonkana bonke nabakhona ohlelweni uphumlani Mhlatshwa la eOrange Farm Victory. So ngeke ngibone la eOrange Farm abantu bethengisa lezi ze-RDP ingena inspection kodwa uthothi emveni kwesikhathi kuba nama-problem nama-complication othi uthothi into RDP isiyavuza sebenza into ey'thile akubi nalabantu abasithi inspection or kube nama-agent othi badayiselana bodwa thothi manje sekudingeka amakomiti angenele sekuyinto ey'thile ey'fana nalezo. Yiziphi indlela abangenza ngazo abangazilandela lana ey'ndaweni lezi ey'fana nalezo ngoba abakubheki lokhu thothi umuntu u-desperate mhlawumbe unenkinga ethile bese ethengisile bese ifana nalowo muntu loyo oyithengile.
Okay, Phumlani siyabonga kakhulu ukusishayela intetho ke lapha ehleleni titakusida ukudzingidza leyo ndzaba leyo. But kwanyalo asathathe likhefu lefu legcina ungasanyaka timbukele siyabuya leli lungelo lakho. Welcome back everybody to our very final segment. Siyacubeka futhi nenzaba yethu namhla ke Phumlani ke ulapha Orange Farm uyabuta ukuthi especially naba ke labathengiselana ama-RDP house ukuthi without my home inspectors ukuthi ke uthole ukuthi there's something goes wrong, where does he go to, especially in a township setting ukuthi angenta njani?
So before, as I said, before the 1st of Feb 2022, he would have no choice and have nowhere else to go. Yeah, but before I come to umbuzo Phumlani, I just need to correct something that Graham was talking about the registration. Yes. Because the information anayo, it was correct until about 2019, right? So since 2019, the NHBRC and there's a professional body which is called SABC. It's one of the 6 Council of Building Environment, CBE, have now created a registration category, which is for building inspectors. You start off as a candidate building inspector, then you become a professional building inspector. So he's right by saying in South Africa, you don't have somebody registered as a home inspector. You've got a building inspector. Now it's a professional registration. It's the same way that you're an accountant of a CASA. Now you've got a registration for building inspectors, and then I think if you're a candidate, there's a designation you must look for at the bottom of their signature. Yes. If they don't have that, that means they're not fully registered in terms of the new legislation. It came in 2019. Okay. So that they must be registered through that. We accept, because most people like myself and Graham have been in the industry for more than 20 years, where we have relied on experience, we have relied on the other training that we've got, and the registration either via NHBRC or other registration. But that has fallen away since 2019. And then SHC-PMP is going through that process to make sure that they bring a cohorts that are properly registered.
So which piece of legislation makes it mandatory?
That building inspectors must be registered.
Like home inspection should be compulsory.
So there's 2 pieces of legislation.
Because John says it's not compulsory, and you're saying that it's been compulsory since February.
singalahle ababukeli kunento ezibhe. Kune inspection, i-process inspection, which is not compulsory. The seller, when you are selling the transaction part, when you are selling, you must declare. Guna mina as an inspector, you're asking a question, how do I get a recourse if I go make a mistake? You must make sure I'm registered, I'm qualified, I've got the right papers. That process, it's registered, it's compulsory.
Okay.
It's sitting with the SABC, PMP, and NHBRC. You must do that from 2019. Before that, it was not available. So I must be registered. So one of the things you're asking, and we'll go to Pumalan, is to check that the person you are hiring is properly registered. As I said, there are some people who are in the system that are being registered with the old system, so you'll find those. But make sure they're registered, they're trained, and they've got the qualification before you hire them as a new industry. Back to, the same applies to umbuzo ka Pumalan. Uguti, before 2022, February, begangana choice, whatever the condition, there was something called food stewards. Yes. You buy whatever as you buy, it buy as is. So what this legislation did is not to remove food steward, but to deal with the fact that you must tell me up front. Don't tell me it's food steward. You must tell me what's wrong with the property. Declare it to me so that when I make the decision to buy, I buy it knowing it has a crack.
Yes.
You told me it has a crack, and I said, no, I'm happy it has a crack. We might negotiate ukuthi sikhulume ngokuthi yehlisa indalo yenza kanje. But at least I know upfront what am I buying.
Okay.
That's what the Property Practitioners Act is doing, which you must declare so that I'm well informed as a consumer.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, John, just picking up on some of the issues that have been raised by Mashilo there, can I use a home inspection or maybe a home inspection report to negotiate the dropping of the value of the selling price? Can I require the seller to lower the price because, for instance, the roof is leaking, because the geyser is leaking, because there's certain cracks on the walls?
Yes, Simpiwe, of course you can, because we live in a free market, and so you can negotiate whatever you like. You can negotiate who pays for the home inspection, what your price is, etc., etc. But may I just make a point about the NHBRC? The NHBRC falls under the National Consumers Housing Act, which deals with the construction of new homes, and the NHBRC is basically a state-funded insurance company to provide certain warranties over 3 months, 1 year, and 5 years for all defects, for roof defects 1 year, and 5 years for structural defects. It doesn't deal with existing buildings, either homes or other buildings, and it is not compulsory, and there is no recognized SAQA, that's the South African Qualifications Authority qualification, which has yet been accredited. The Quality Council for Trades and Occupations developed a task team with the municipalities and the home inspection industry and banks, and developed a curriculum for building inspectors, which includes inspecting new building work and also inspecting existing buildings. And that's two very different things. Inspecting a 30-year-old house and inspecting a brand new house are two different things. You need the same knowledge of a lot of things, but you also need different detection skills and different experience.
Okay.
And so I beg to differ with my colleague. The Statutory Council, the SACPCMP, is a statutory council for construction and project management professionals. And yes, indeed, they have a building inspector registration, but it is not a certification for inspectors of existing buildings, because there is no benchmark qualification yet.
Okay, John, unfortunately, we are out of time. But just briefly, are you at liberty to share with us the estimate cost of a home inspection?
Anywhere between 2,000 and 10,000 Rand, depending on the number of rooms and the extent of the property. Okay. So at the bottom end of the market, House Check, for instance, will do a thorough IPCA, which is all the structural, functional, and safety issues, for between 2,000 and 3,000. Okay. At the top end of the market, it might be 7,000 or 8,000.
Right.
But for a 20 million Rand property.
John Graham, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Mr.
My
Mashilo,
pleasure.
before we wrap the show, do you want to share with us, some of the factors to look out for or to consider as I'm selecting a home inspection? Do I have to check whether it's registered? And if so, do you want to share the details of those registration bodies?
So the first is we've got something at my home check that says it's called a quick 10-point check.
Yes.
Yeah, that you, as you're walking through the house, you can, things to look out for. So you don't have to climb on the roof. And so there's 10 elements that if you quickly check through those, and you can do that visually, do a visual inspection, you should be able, if the house is fine, all of those you should be able to have a tick. And then there's templates available for the people that are interested. They can go to my home check. There's a template with this 10-point check where you can quickly, as a buyer, be able to. One of those simple ones is this: if you're interested in buying a house, open a tap for a minute for hot water and leave it and see if hot water
home
comes
inspector,
out.
home inspector.
As I said, there's 10 elements that you must look at.
Okay.
5 of them are outside, 5 of them are inside. The outside one is the roof, the outside walls, the garden, the what we call edge of the house, and the inside ones includes the ceiling, the interior walls, the floors, and then the lighting and the switches. A simple thing, if you walk around the route and you see a switch that has
I wish we had more time,
you
Mr.
could
Mcheng.
deal
I
with.
wish we had more time. This is a very interesting conversation. But nonetheless, thank you so much for joining us. We do
Most
appreciate
welcome.
your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me thank our studio guests for their time. Join us again next week for yet another interactive consumer affairs show. Till then, do have a great week. Bye-bye.
Home